Hello and good evening. Welcome back to Tie-Dye Car Guy. In this episode, I'm going to be replacing a burned wire on the 1960 Thunderbird that goes from the ignition switch to this big relay under the hood. Now, there's lots of how-to videos for soldering wires and making electrical repairs, so I'm not going to bore you with all the basic stuff. I'm just going to show you some tips and things that I do to make for better wiring repairs. This is my nifty little butane powered soldering iron there. You can tell it's on, it's glowing. This is my replacement wire. And one thing I am going to do differently, this will be hidden under the dash, is I'm going to put an inline 30 amp fuse. This, I don't know, the other old wire was so badly burned that had there been a fuse in place, probably would have stopped all that damage from happening. So, yeah, here we go. Now, when you're doing these type of repairs, there's a few little things. With automotive soldering, I'll shut this off, and many other instances, you want to use rosin core solder. Not lead core, rosin core. Little thing makes a difference. And yes, I do buy a lot of my little terminals and whatnot from Advanced. I don't see any harm in that, because the way I do it, I'm not really going to have a problem anyways. Get you a good pair of wire strippers. These are decent. And of course, a good pair of side cutters and a little bit of electrical tape. And that's really all you need. And of course a wet sponge for cleaning your soldering iron, just in case you're not too familiar with this stuff. And again, there's lots of different ways of doing this, to each their own. This is just how I do it and how I was taught. When you're stripping the wires, you want to be really careful to just take the insulation off and try not to cut as much of the wire as possible. We want the best possible circuit here. Now this inline fuse holder came pre-cut like this, and that's great. But what I do is I go a little over 1/4 of an inch, not quite 1/2 inch, but a little over 1/4 of an inch, and I'll take them and kind of fan them out a little bit. Oh, and before you start this process, do not forget the heat shrink. This is one thing I'm notorious for, is I'll have the nicest soldered wire ever, and I will have forgotten to put on the daggum heat shrink. So I take them, and just to preserve this stuff, because it's not exactly cheap, I will cut these in half. So that's really all you need. All you're trying to do is prevent moisture from getting into your nicely soldered connection. That's the gist of the whole thing. So go ahead and slip this on so we don't forget it later. Or I'll put it on the other end, because in the process of flowing the solder, you're going to get the wire pretty hot, and you want to make sure and slide this back a ways, because I can't tell you how many times I have soldered a connection together and gone to put my heat shrink up, and oh, the wire got too hot and it shrunk around the wire, which that sucks. So let's not do that. Slide that down. Fan these out. And then I always just try to twist them together. And depending on what you're working on, be it under a dash, whatever, you might not have that much room to do this, and it can be a challenge sometimes, but well, that's part of the job. Nobody said it would be easy. So you just kind of get these together here. Really, all I want them to do is to be together enough to where I can take my hands away from this and it'll stay together, so that I can free up my hands to do the actual solder. Get this to cooperate with me. Now, I like to take a pair of pliers like these nice ones I got from the Worth guy, which they were definitely worth it. Haha. Terrible pun. Sorry. All this junk out of the way here. And let me zoom in. You can see what I'm doing. Okay. There we go. So that should be pretty well zoomed in. All right, let me fire up my iron here. Now, if you're not too familiar with solder, the first thing you're going to want to do is tin the tip of the soldering iron so that it will facilitate the process. Keep the solder nice and hot. Sometimes it takes a minute for this thing to warm up. It's been a little finicky lately, but I've had it for a while. Just get this thing to cooperate with me. Okay. So, that's a little sloppy, but you get the idea. I'm going to actually clean that off. Okay, so tin the tip of the iron. Now, with the solder itself, I usually pull a good bit out of the tube just so I don't get stuck in the middle of soldering a wire or something and realize, oh crap, I don't really have enough pulled out of this thing. So that tinned, and you hold it on there for a minute, let it get hot. Probably should have used a bigger tip for this, but oh well. I go through a lot of them at work. Come on now. There we go. Now it's starting to flow in. Once the connection gets hot enough, it'll just kind of suck the solder right into it. So there we go. I just kind of paint it on there. You don't want to go overboard, but the whole point of this is to make a good connection that's not just using cheap crimp connectors from a parts store. This is a permanent repair. And this is not some kind of crazy difficult science here. Anybody can do this. Okay. Ooh, that wire is hot. So, let's see how this turned out here. Zoom back out. Now, as you can see, we have our connection. Honestly, not my best work, but that's definitely through and through. One wire to the other, cannot pull it apart. And I won't pretend to be the end-all be-all mechanic. I'm sure some people are going to look at this and maybe make fun of it a little bit. Oh, well, that looks like crap. Well, you know, if you can do it better, good for you. But I made the connection I needed to, and now I'm going to cover that with heat shrink. So we slide our piece of the wire, and see, half of that tube was really all you needed for this part. Now, normally I have a very nice little butane torch that I would use to, you know, and shrink that on, but I cannot find it, so what I'm gonna have to use is just a regular stick lighter, which is fine, but you don't want to go too crazy with this. Just be careful and just kind of touch it just enough to make it shrink on there, because if you burn it, it'll kind of bubble up and then it'll just expand again, and you'll have to redo almost everything. Or if you're lazy and wanting to do it half-assed, you just cover it in electrical tape and move on with your life. But that's not how I do my job. So here we go. Make sure it's on there nice and even all the way around. And there we go. So that is a soldered connection that is insulated and covered so that moisture cannot get in here, and there will never be another headache with this wire again. Now, the other end of this equation is, okay, so this is the end that is going to go on the tab of the relay or the ignition switch. In this case, this end of it will be under the dash, just to preserve the originality of the wiring loom under the hood. I don't want people to see my fuse holder here. So anyways, this end has to connect to our ignition switch. So you're going to use something that looks like this. Now this is for like an 18 gauge wire, and this wire is a little bigger, so I'll have to upsize a wee bit. And when you're going with these, of course, I'll take them and just twist the end here, so that way it kind of goes into the terminal loop a little better, a little easier. Sometimes these are a booger to get on here. Oh, before I do this, before I go and forget, heat shrink on wire. Now, here's the part where I'm going to do something a little different than what most people would probably do. Because we're going to take our terminal loop and put it on, and if you twist it as you put this on here, it'll go down on there a little easier, and twist in the same direction you twisted the wire together. Just makes it easier. One little thing I've learned. And you can see there it is fully seated in the terminal end. Now this is the part where most people would just take their crimp tool, and this one is really basic, so this is how I imagine most people would do. They would take this and go on here and crimp it on. And then they would take this as such, connect it to the switch or what have you, and call it a day. There we go, wire replaced. Well, to me, that's not good enough, because that, yes, that is a crimped connection, but I don't like this, because if I were to pull on this hard enough, it would just pull off. So it's really just not good enough for me. And maybe I'm being overly picky about this. I don't know, it just helps me sleep at night. I feel better about the quality of work I provide when I do it this way. So I'll take my side cutters and cut this blue bit off of here. Carefully. We don't want to undo our crimp, and we definitely don't want to hurt our freshly soldered wire there. And there we go. It can be a little finicky, but just be careful. Don't force it. Now, it's off. So there you can see my crimp and the wire, of course, in the terminal loop. And that crimp looks pretty good. So here's what I'm going to do. I'll hold this in place with my plier. Now with this part of it, you do have to be kind of fast, because once that wire starts to heat, it might melt this heat shrink tube onto this wire, because remember, it's going to get hot, and I mean hot, so don't burn yourself. So get all this other stuff out of the way here. Now zoom back in so y'all can see this. What I do is fire up my soldering iron, just get good and hot. Basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to run a bead of solder into this terminal connection loop, because that will make it 100% secure, not going to pull off no matter what. And then I take the heat shrink, move it up, cover my solder joint, you know, therefore insulating it, and then I'm satisfied with my wiring repair. Then and only then. And I know maybe this is overkill, maybe not, but some of the wiring jobs I do at work, I don't have room for error. I can't have a wire pulling out of a crimp terminal connection. That would not be okay with someone who owns, say, a $200,000 E-type Jag or something like that. I'm just not going to do a poor quality repair. So, anywho, our iron is getting good and hot here. Just going to hold it up next to it like this. Just get it hot. The solder will do the work. Okay, so again, we don't want to do this for too long, because if you do, and you get it too hot for too long, you're going to melt your heat shrink onto your wire, because that did get pretty toasty there. And now we have our finished result, almost, where you can see that's not going to pull out of there. Okay, that's permanent, and that's the only way that I do my wiring jobs. I don't want the customer to have any more issues, and I'm usually the guy going behind people who just crimp and go, and it bugs the snot out of me. So slide our heat shrink up here like such. That way all you see is your neat little loop, and heat this on here, not burn ourselves. It's going to be great. sorry I keep going off center there, but I'm just kind of fanning the flame near the heat shrink. You don't want to get too close or you'll burn it. Okay, so you guys get the idea. There we go. Final result. Permanent repair. That's the way I do my wiring work. Thank you guys for watching this. Sorry if it was a little long. I just wanted to show you my whole process there when I do my repairs. But thank you guys for watching and subscribing and liking. If anybody's actually watching these things, I don't know. But I hope you enjoy.